Is this some kind of joke? Captain Sarah Chen's voice cut through the climate-controlled silence of the NSA Field Operations Center. She stood in front of a wall of monitors, each one displaying streams of encrypted data that had been cycling uselessly for the past 16 hours. Her team of 12 cyber warfare specialists sat at their stations, exhausted and frustrated, staring at code that refused to break. The message had been intercepted from a known hostile network, and intelligence suggested it contained coordinates for an imminent attack on a military convoy in Eastern Europe. They had the transmission. They had the file. They had every cutting-edge decryption tool the United States military could provide. What they didn't have was time, and what they couldn't crack was the code. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Marcus Rivera said from his station, his voice hoarse from hours of work. "We've tried every algorithm in the database. Whatever encryption method they're using, it's not in our system. It's not even close to anything we recognize." Chen rubbed her eyes. She'd been awake for 23 hours straight. "Play the audio file again." Rivera complied. Through the speakers came a series of seemingly random electronic tones, beeps, clicks, and bursts of static that lasted exactly 47 seconds. To the trained ear, it sounded like corrupted data or interference. To Chen's team, it had been a puzzle that was slowly driving them insane. "There has to be a pattern," Chen muttered. "There's always a pattern." At that moment, there was a knock on the operations center door. A young airman, barely out of basic training, stuck his head in apologetically. "Captain Chen? Sorry to interrupt, ma'am, but there's a civilian at the front gate asking to see someone in charge of communications. He says he heard about the problem." Chen's head snapped up. "Heard about the problem? This is a classified facility. How would a civilian know we have a problem?" "He says he owns the electronics repair shop in town, and one of the specialists mentioned it while getting his personal laptop fixed. He seems pretty insistent, ma'am. Says he might be able to help." "Tell him to—" Chen started, then stopped. 16 hours. No progress. A convoy that would be moving in less than 10 hours. "What's his name?" "Walsh. Leonard Walsh. He's about 80. Looks like somebody's grandfather." Chen exchanged glances with Rivera. They were desperate, and desperate times called for at least hearing what the old man had to say. "Fine. Escort him to conference room B. I'll give him 5 minutes." Leonard Walsh didn't look like someone who could solve a problem that had stumped the military's best cryptographers. He was thin, slightly stooped, with wispy white hair and thick glasses that magnified his pale blue eyes. He wore a simple button-down shirt, khaki pants, and carried a worn canvas messenger bag that looked like it had seen decades of use. His hands trembled slightly. Parkinson's, maybe, or just age. Chen met him in the conference room, her arms crossed, her expression making it clear that she was humoring him out of desperation rather than hope. "Mr. Walsh, I appreciate you coming by, but I need to be direct. We're dealing with a classified situation. I can't discuss details with civilians." Leonard settled into a chair and placed his bag on the table. "You've intercepted a message. 47 seconds of audio that sounds like random electronic noise. You've been trying to decrypt it for most of the day, and you're getting nowhere." Chen's jaw tightened. "That information is classified. How do you—" "Because the young man who came into my shop was stressed and tired and mentioned he was working on some impossible audio encryption thing," Leonard said gently. "I didn't ask for details. He didn't give any. But when you've done what I've done, you recognize the pattern. And what exactly have you done, Mr. Walsh?" Leonard reached into his bag and pulled out an old, battered object. It was a telegraph key, the kind used for sending Morse code. The brass was tarnished, the wooden base scarred with age, but it had been lovingly maintained. "I was a signals intelligence analyst during the Cold War, 1962 through 1989. I spent 27 years listening to Soviet communications, tracking their codes, their patterns, their methods." Chen's skepticism didn't waver. "That was 40 years ago. Technology has changed everything." "Yes, I know," Leonard agreed. "Your computers can process millions of combinations per second. They can crack codes that would have taken us years to even attempt. But here's what hasn't changed: human nature. When people want to hide something, they often return to methods that worked before, especially methods that modern analysts might overlook because they're too old, too simple, too analog. Chen was about to dismiss him when Rivera appeared at the conference room door, looking even more exhausted than before. "Captain, we just got word. The convoy moves in 8 hours. If we don't crack this, people are going to die." Leonard looked at Chen with those magnified blue eyes. "Let me listen to it. Just once. If I can't help, I'll leave quietly." Chen made a decision born of exhaustion and the crushing weight of potential consequences. "Fine. 5 minutes, Mr. Walsh. That's all I can give you." They returned to the operations center, and Chen noticed her team's reactions to the elderly civilian, barely concealed annoyance mixed with curiosity. She gestured to Rivera. "Play the file." The 47 seconds of electronic noise filled the room. Leonard stood perfectly still, his eyes closed, his head tilted slightly to one side. His lips moved silently, and his fingers twitched in small, rhythmic patterns. When the recording ended, he stood in silence for another 10 seconds. "Play it again, please. Slower this time if you can." Rivera manipulated the controls, and the audio played at half speed, the tones deepening and stretching. Leonard's fingers moved more deliberately now, tapping an invisible pattern on his leg. Chen watched, fascinated despite herself, as the old man seemed to be conducting an invisible orchestra. When it ended the second time, Leonard opened his eyes. "It's not an encryption. Well, it is, but not the way you're thinking. It's a substitution overlay on modified Morse code." The room went silent. Chen blinked. "Morse code? That's impossible. We analyzed the frequency patterns, You analyzed it with computers, looking for modern encryption algorithms," Leonard said, his voice still gentle but now carrying an edge of certainty. "What you have is Morse code that's been electronically masked to sound like random noise. The dits and das are there, but they've been converted to different frequency tones and overlaid with interference. It's brilliant, actually. Old school meets new school." Lieutenant Rivera was already pulling up new analysis software. "Sir, with respect, if it was Morse code, our systems would have flagged it immediately. We have algorithms specifically designed to recognize standard Morse code." "Yes," Leonard interrupted. "But this isn't standard. Listen." He played the audio again, this time tapping his finger on the table in rhythm. "Hear that? That's not the standard timing ratio. They've compressed the spaces and extended the tones. Your computer is listening for the classic 3-to-1 ratio of dits to das. This is using a 2-to-1 ratio, which makes it sound irregular to automated systems." Chen felt a cold trickle of realization. "You're saying you can decode this by ear?" "I'm saying I already have most of it." Leonard pulled a small notebook from his bag, the kind with graph paper, filled with his neat, precise handwriting. "The first part is a location identifier, grid coordinates, if I'm not mistaken. Then there's a timestamp. The rest is a series of numbers that I suspect are vehicle identifiers, or route markers." Rivera stared at the notebook. "You got all that from 2 listens? 35 years of listening to Soviet submarine communications will train your ear," Leonard said. "The Russians love to modify their Morse timing to frustrate Western analysts. After a while, you stop relying on what the machines tell you and start trusting what you hear." Chen grabbed the notebook. The coordinates were written out clearly, along with partial translations of the numeric sequences. "Lieutenant, pull up tactical maps for these coordinates. Now." As Rivera worked, Chen turned back to Leonard. "Mr. Walsh, I need to know. Are you certain about this? Give me access to proper equipment, and I can decode the entire message in an hour," Leonard replied. "But if you want a quick answer, yes, I'm certain. I've been listening to codes like this since before most of your team was born." The tactical map appeared on the main screen, and Chen felt her stomach drop. The coordinates Leonard had decoded matched perfectly with the planned route for the convoy. If this was right, they had less than 8 hours to either change the route or set up a counter-ambush. "How?" Chen asked, gesturing at the audio file. "How did you know to listen for modified Morse code?" Leonard smiled slightly. "Because when I was listening to Soviet communications in the 1980s, we did the exact same thing. Took old methods, gave them a modern twist, and transmitted them right under the enemy's nose. It's a classic misdirection. Make something old sound so unusual that modern systems dismiss it as noise." Chen made another command decision. "Mr. Walsh, I'm going to need you to stay. Can you decode the rest of this message? I'll need a quiet space, a decent audio system, and maybe some coffee, Leonard said. These old ears aren't what they used to be, but they remember. Over the next hour, Leonard worked in a small office that had been cleared for him. Chen had assigned Corporal David Park, one of their junior analysts who had studied historical cryptography, to assist him. Park watched in fascination as Leonard played the audio file dozens of times, each time writing down letters and numbers in his notebook. "How do you know which tone represents which letter?" Park asked. Leonard tapped his temple. "Pattern recognition. Once you identify the base structure, the rhythm of the Morse, you start looking for common letter combinations. In English, certain letters appear together frequently. Th, in, er. If this is a Russian-based system, you look for Cyrillic patterns. The audio might be disguised, but the linguistic structure underneath doesn't change. But you're doing this without any reference materials, without computers running probability analysis." "Computers are faster," Leonard agreed, "but they lack context. I spent decades listening to Soviet radio operators. They had quirks, habits, favorite phrases. This particular style, the 2-to-1 ratio, the frequency masking, I've heard it before, or something very close to it." As Leonard worked, Chen stood in the doorway, watching. The old man's hands shook when he reached for his coffee, but when he was writing or adjusting the audio controls, they were steady, precise. This wasn't luck or guesswork. This was muscle memory, expertise so deeply ingrained it had become instinctive. After 53 minutes, Leonard set down his pen. "Done." Chen grabbed the notebook. The message was decoded completely. "Convoy route Alpha, grid 47.2341/23.5678, 0800 hours, 4 vehicles, RPG. Ambush position Northeast Ridge. Confirm receipt." It was everything they needed. More than that, it was actionable intelligence that could save lives. Chen immediately called the operations commander. Within minutes, the convoy route was changed, and a special forces team was dispatched to the ambush coordinates. If Leonard was right, and Chen was now certain he was, they would catch the attackers before they could strike. She returned to the small office where Leonard was packing up his bag. "Mr. Walsh, you just saved a dozen lives, possibly more. I need to understand how someone with your skills isn't working for us officially." Leonard smiled, a sad, knowing expression. "I did work for you officially, for 27 years. But eventually you get old, and the agency decides your skills are obsolete, that the new generation with their computers and algorithms can do the job better. Usually they're right. The world changes, technology advances. But sometimes, just sometimes, the old ways are useful. We owe you a debt." "You owe me nothing," Leonard said. "I did what I was trained to do, what I spent most of my life doing. The only difference is that nobody asked me to do it for the last 30 years. Chen made a decision. "Mr. Walsh, I'm going to file a report about this incident. It's going to go to some very important people. Would you be willing to come back? Maybe consult on situations like this? We could make me a contractor at absurd hourly rates?" Leonard finished, his eyes twinkling. "Captain, I'm 79 years old. I have Parkinson's disease. I'm happy fixing radios and old televisions in my shop. But if you need me for something like this, something that might save lives, you know where to find me." He handed her a business card, simple, home-printed. "Walsh Electronics Repair, no job too old." 3 weeks later, Chen received confirmation that the Special Forces team had indeed found and neutralized a 6-man ambush team at the exact coordinates Leonard had decoded. The convoy had passed through safely, completely unaware of the threat that had been waiting for them. She also received a call from a 2-star general at Fort Meade, headquarters of the NSA. "Captain Chen, I've read your report about Mr. Walsh. I've also reviewed his service record. It's remarkable. I'm authorizing a commendation and a formal invitation for him to join our Historical Cryptography Advisory Board. Did he accept your offer to consult?" "He said he'd help if we needed him, sir. But he's not interested in a formal position." "Then we'll keep his number on file," the general said. "And Captain, I'm mandating additional training for all signals intelligence personnel on historical encryption methods. We got lucky this time. We might not be so lucky next time. Back in his small electronics repair shop in the quiet town outside the base, Leonard Walsh sat at his workbench, carefully soldering a circuit board for a customer's vintage radio. The shop was cluttered but organized. Shelves lined with old components, coils of wire, vacuum tubes, and transistors from every era of electronics. On the wall behind him hung a framed photograph from 1985. A much younger Leonard wearing headphones, sitting at a console filled with dials and switches, his face illuminated by the green glow of an oscilloscope. The bell above the shop door chimed, and Corporal Park walked in, out of uniform carrying a box. "Mr. Walsh, I hope I'm not interrupting." Leonard looked up and smiled. "David, isn't it? The young analyst who helped me." "Yes, sir. I wanted to bring you something." Park set the box on the counter. "The captain thought you might like to have this." Leonard opened the box. Inside was a modern tablet computer, but next to it was something more meaningful. A framed certificate from the National Security Agency, thanking him for extraordinary service in support of national security operations. And beneath that, wrapped carefully in cloth, was his old telegraph key, the one he'd brought to the base. But it had been restored, the brass polished, the wooden base refinished, mounted on a small plaque that read, "The listener, still hearing what others cannot." Leonard's hands trembled as he touched the key. "I can't accept this." "You already earned it, sir. 30 years ago. We're just late in giving it to you." Park hesitated. "Mr. Walsh, can I ask you something? When they retired you, when they said your skills were obsolete, how did you deal with that, knowing that what you'd spent your life doing was being replaced?" Leonard set down the key and looked at the young man. "I was angry at first, felt useless, forgotten. But then I realized something important. Skills aren't obsolete. They're just dormant. The knowledge doesn't disappear just because nobody's asking for it. It waits. And when it's needed again, if you've kept yourself sharp, kept practicing even in small ways, it's still there." He gestured around the shop. "Every old radio I fix, every vintage piece of equipment I repair, I'm keeping those neural pathways active. The same ears that listened for Soviet submarine transmissions are now listening for failing capacitors and short circuits. Different application, same fundamental skill. Listening for patterns that others miss." Park nodded slowly. "The captain wants me to learn historical methods. She says we've become too dependent on computers." "She's wise," Leonard agreed. "Computers are tools, powerful ones, but they're only as good as their programming. If someone uses a method that's not in the computer's database, the computer is blind. But a human who understands the principles, who can recognize patterns across different eras and technologies, that human can adapt in ways no algorithm can match." Over the following months, Leonard became an unofficial consultant to the NSA's Field Operations Center. He didn't work regularly, didn't want an office or a title. But when something unusual came up, something that defied conventional analysis, Chen would call him. Sometimes it was Morse code. Sometimes it was old Soviet number stations. Once, it was a World War II-era cipher that someone had modified for modern use. Each time, Leonard would drive his old Volvo to the base, listen carefully, and decode what the computers could not. And each time, he'd return to his shop, to his workbench, to his quiet life fixing the obsolete technology that everyone else had forgotten. One evening, as he was closing up shop, he found Corporal Park waiting outside. "Mr. Walsh, I've been studying the historical methods you mentioned. Morse code, old substitution ciphers, number stations. It's fascinating how much we've lost." "Not lost," Leonard corrected gently. "Archived, waiting to be rediscovered." He locked the shop door and turned to the young man. "The most dangerous thing in intelligence work isn't a new threat. It's an old threat that we've forgotten how to recognize. That's why history matters. That's why the old ways still matter." As Park walked away, Leonard looked up at the evening sky. Somewhere above, satellites were transmitting encrypted data at the speed of light. Computers were processing millions of calculations per second, and artificial intelligence was learning to crack codes that would have taken human analysts years. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe for more stories.